Side Part. It's like a book club with your best friend, but make it a podcast. Welcome back, crawlers, to another episode of Side Part. I'm Nikki, your bookish bestie, and today we are going to continue our crawl through book number 5 in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, The Butcher's Masquerade by Matt Dinniman. Today's episode is going to focus on part 3, which is The Unhinged Child. If you have not yet watched parts 1 and 2 of this book, or want to watch any of my other Dungeon Crawler Carl videos, I'll link them down in the description below. But also, please remember, you're reading along with me. I have not read ahead in this series, so all of my thoughts, theories, reactions are just based on books 1 through 4 and parts 1, 2, and 3 of book 5, which also means there will be spoilers for the entire series up to that point. Also, remember, these are very adult books with some very adult scenes. I will do my best to keep it PG-13, but please, please be mindful of your audience at home. And I will also give you a heads up if there is not such PG-13 content within this episode. And as promised, I am going to kick off this episode with some comments from last week's video because I want to make you all a bigger part of this series. And you guys honestly just give me some really good answers, feedback, comments, and I want to do my best to try to include some of those at the top of every episode. And I know I said this before in previous episodes, but if you're new here, I love getting comments. I love getting feedback. I love when you answer my questions. I love when you correct me. Like, I know I get things wrong. These are just my reactions and unfiltered thoughts. But if things pop up throughout the episode and you're like, I don't know if she got that right, or, ooh, I think she should talk about this a little more, please, please drop it down in the comments below. I literally try to read every comment that I get. And you honestly are what makes this series feel so fun and engaging and like a little community. So please give me your feedback. So let's move forward a little bit to the actual comments. Enough of me yapping about comments. Let's actually get into the content. The first comment I want to highlight, someone said, I think we haven't been putting a lot of attention to the other crawlers that eventually become more and more impactful in the books. So all of Florin's, Louise, Virus's, Brittany's, and Daniel Batista's stories start to intertwine more and more with this party. And admittedly, I really haven't done the best job at covering them. I will do my best to rectify this moving forward. And gosh, Florin's story was just heartbreaking. Watching, I think you say Fichi, I think that was his partner's name. But watching her die from bullets that he shot directly at Lucia, and then I think it was, oh my gosh, what was it? She used the rubber spell. So essentially, Florin shot shotgun bullets at her. She used a rubber spell, and then they directly went to Afici. And then the system, which was so morbid and twisted, gave Florin the gold skull for killing Afici. Afechi? I'm probably saying her name wrong, and I do apologize. But if you don't know, I have not been listening to the audio since I think midway through book 2, because it's so hard for me to take notes when I'm listening to audio. I get so wrapped up in the story that I forget to actually write things down. And so I fully intend on doing a re-listen after I finish this physical reading series. So please, if I say a name wrong, correct me down in the comments, like I mentioned before, and I will do my best to say it right moving forward. I'm pretty sure I said Louis' name as Louis many times before someone corrected me. So again, I appreciate you all. But it was just absolutely horrendous and absolutely heartbreaking. And I feel like I should have covered that. But now that I know they're becoming a much more integral part of the party, I will do my best to note things as we move forward. And also, speaking of feedback, you guys have been really great about saying we want a little bit more. We want you to spread things out, which has given me space to highlight more things moving forward. And kind of talking about a few other players that were mentioned in that comment. I mean, Louis, my goodness, Louis has become, how do I say this? He's become an integral part of their little guild system, but he's kind of someone that I'm noticing not only obviously has romantic relationships with Juice Box, someone Samantha pines over, which I still just don't understand. I think it's supposed to be funny, but I don't know, how is he pulling all of these ladies within the dungeon is beyond me. But there's also these moments where Carl and Katya are trying to almost protect his identity. We see that Katya kind of spies him, I think, crying at one point. She DMs Carl and says, hey, I think he's really struggling, thinking he's not doing a good job, and we're trying to bolster his confidence. And I think he's worried we're going to kick him out of the guild. And then rather than confronting him or embarrassing him, they try to find organic ways to help him feel more empowered, which I honestly find so moving. And then we have Daniel Bautista, which I think there's something romantically possibly going on with him and Katya, and Carl makes note of their physical closeness at one point. And I guess what I'm trying to say in a very, very long-winded way that I have indeed noticed these characters, and no, I have not done the best job at making note of them. But know that, one, I did not realize how much these characters would become just as big as they are. Like, I truly just noted them as just fellow crawlers that we kind of passed by. But moving forward, trust me when I say I definitely do notice them, and I will be doing a much, much better job rectifying that I have not chatted about them in the past. There was another comment that gave me immediate pause, and it said, the Viva la Revolucion bit stunned me and still worries me. Donut is smart, but is Zev using her? I like Zev, but her and Donut are light years past Gilmore Girls now. The stakes are so high. And I'm ashamed to admit this, but it never really crossed my mind that Zev could be betraying them. I don't know if it's because she was tortured or she just seems to be acting against the Bourne Corporation, but it never occurred to me, and I feel a little foolish saying this, that she couldn't possibly still be working against Donut and Carl just for a different group. She also seems very, very chummy with Odette. So chummy with Odette. And we also know that she mentioned casually to Carl, and I think it was at one point during the CrawlCon, she says this. She says, when this is all over, those of us who stayed on after the change don't know if we'll be welcomed home or executed as traitors. Plus, my entire family was slaughtered because they refused to wear a pin, which we know was for the bloom. But she says, I got a job to do. I got to go, Carl. I'll see you in a few hours. And she does also hint to being heavily surveilled now that the Valtae are involved. And so you just have to wonder, like, what pressures is she facing? And are they enough to make her betray Donut and Carl? I like to think she has a strong allegiance to them, but like also she has nothing to lose now. And we know that. There was one last question that I wanted to highlight, and it was an answer to one of the questions that I posed. So my question was, why would the Apothecary want to do like a blanket sponsorship of the top 10? And someone has said maybe they are trying to sponsor one specific crawler, but they want to hide their sponsorship behind like backing the entire top 10. And so that's interesting. Let's roll with that for a minute. So especially because not only did Carl have the sponsorship of the Apothecary moving into this part, but he also gained the sponsorship of the Plenty as well. And so now, if they are just trying to hide their sponsorship of one specific crawler, it can't be Prepotente, because I feel like they're so obvious with their support of Prepotente. And if that's the case, like, because they're not being covert, especially when they sent like Prepotente, like that spray bottle, and they're being so obvious about the Apothecary and the Plenty kind of having this conjoined support and like working together. So it leads you to wonder, do they actually want to be covert, or do they want their support to be obvious? Are they almost trying to flex their political muscle by working together, by sponsoring all the top crawlers and working kind of against the dungeon? Or is there another crawler besides Prepotente that they're really trying to support and that they kind of want to pull through? So I don't know. This comment just gave me pause as well. I was like, that's really interesting. I didn't even think of that. With that being said, let's actually dive into these chapters, because my gosh, so much happened. I actually admittedly had a really hard time writing the outline for this episode, because I didn't even know where to start, how to group things. There was so much, and I felt like I was highlighting things every other page because it all felt so important. Truthfully, every highlight that I did highlight, I tried to include in some way, because I was like, I need to make note of that. Like, that seems really important. And so at the start of these chapters, Carl is just like abruptly transferred away from the town that they were in. So they were in Lucia's town, which I think is really important, or a town that she had taken over. And Donut is not with him. So he's immediately transported to Zev at CrawlCon. But before we dive into the altercation that they faced once he got back to Lucia's town, I really just want to talk about CrawlCon itself. So even though he kind of toggled back and forth between the con, I'm just going to kind of lump everything together just so we can kind of move past it, but really focus in on it as well. And before I talk about what happened there, I just want to say I loved the way Matt wrote these scenes. I mean, you truly felt as if you were at a convention. And so as much as like conventions can be exciting, there's also like this boring element to it as well. And just like kind of like being in lines and waiting around. And I feel like he just so adeptly captured the vibes. Here are some of my favorite moments from CrawlCon itself. So first things first, Carl bringing a little kids art competition for one of the security gnolls to have like his grandchild Lix win. I just really felt like, one, that was hilarious, but two, it wasn't as simple as it seemed. Like, yes, he got some like really he got some good access to things when he came back to like that waiting space before he went back into the dungeon. But I just don't feel like it was as transactional as it seemed. I feel like there's going to be some more severe consequences or potentially unforeseen benefits that we haven't quite seen yet. And I think this is going to come at a very crucial time. And this seemingly simple act was not quite so simple. Also, during this art competition, we had like the three little goats like roll up and be like, judge me. And I feel like that was not just like some simple creepy thing. I think we're starting to see like how like pervasive the plenty are and like kind of the impact that they have on their followers. And we also learned that the Prepotente goes on a show with them every few days. And so we know that he's far more connected than I think I initially gave him credit for, or that I realized, maybe not credit, but more than I realized. I think my favorite moment of the crawl, though, when Carl was under the influence and he was just antagonizing Vra's mother, Cersei Took, relentlessly. And you cannot convince me that it was entirely from whatever the security guards were smoking. I mean, I fully believe Carl was meaning everything that he said. I think that whatever the guards kind of exposed him to just made this outer shell just kind of fall away a little bit, where he could just let his inner monologue just roll. And honestly, Unhinged Carl, kind of my favorite person. And so one line that he said, and it just kind of, man, it took me out a little bit, I'm not gonna lie. So when Cersei Took was going on and on about like the history of why they started the dungeon and everything, she was just, I mean, I thought it was a little bit interesting, but no one at the panel did. Like, they were there for the showdown between Carl and Cersei, and rightfully so. But Carl says, you killed me. I'm literally dead right now. Your kid couldn't do it, but you pulled it off. You succeeded in boring me to death. And I loved it. These are one of those moments where I kind of wish I was listening on audio, because I feel like it would have been epic. But when Cersei stormed off, Carl vows to be the one to not only kill her daughters, but he refers to the dungeon as my dungeon. And just showing this ownership of the dungeon, and kind of, we just really see him in these chapters specifically, like claiming the dungeon as his own. Like, I know we talk about this almost in every episode now, but like, yes, Carl is the one happening to the dungeon at this point. Like, he is exploiting it, he is running it, and I know that seems like cool on the outset, and very like macho masculine. There's also this heaviness to it that I don't think I appreciate until I'm like going back through my notes. But there is this point where you realize, and I mentioned this imagery or this image before of like Atlas shouldering the world on his back, but Carl kind of using this language, like reclaiming this world or this dungeon as his own, is essentially like just like this heavy task. And it's like he's claiming it, sure, but there's so much more that goes along with it. It's not purely like, this is my dungeon, I run things. Like, I think there's this responsibility he feels, and not only to Donut, but to other crawlers and NPCs as well. But we also do see that falling away a little bit, and I will talk about that a little bit more later. There was something really interesting that happened, though, before the panel even took place with Cersei. So it was before she arrived, and the other panelists are sitting there. Carl's transported there virtually, but they cannot see him. But he can hear and see everything. And we know that's probably intentional, maybe unintentional, I don't know. But these little pocketed interactions where Carl's getting exposed to just like these organic interactions with other aliens and other maybe former crawlers, or in this case, the panelists, I think they seem outwardly a little bit boring, just casual conversation, but there's so much to these little interactions. I really want to unpack this little pocket of a conversation that I'm talking about. So I think it'd be helpful if I just read a little passage of that interaction, and then we'll unpack it after. So one of the panelists says, yeah, he's a psycho, Moxo added, but he's a funny psycho, so they use him for a lot of panels. I think he's a wormhead now, can't remember. Don't say that in here, Frito growled to his companion, and he is. He died a few years back in a fight at a way station, but he had a Valte contract, and they got to him in time. They always do, Moxo said. Keeping the best of you alive, he added in a sing-song voice, like it was a jingle. Gods damn it, Moxo, Frito hissed, don't F around. Panel starts in 2 minutes and 6 seconds, a disembodied female voice announced. So you think Carl is going to survive? Sydney was saying to the elf. If he does die, this panel will be his last appearance. It'll be great for my book sales. You know, Drix said, his voice full of disdain. He's probably sitting in that chair right now, listening to everything you say. They don't let crawlers listen in on this stuff, Sydney said. The Valtae are much more intelligent about security than the mudskippers ever were, Drake grunted. The Valtae aren't running the crawl. The Borant Corporation still is. It's a big difference. It's all mudskipper infrastructure with mercenary support. He turned and looked directly at me. Wow, that was really loaded. And what I took away from it was a lot. I mean, there's just so many pieces going on here. So one, there's like this open disdain for the Valtae. And there's also this really, really like palpable fear that you can just feel, like the other aliens, like the panels especially, like you feel the fear of like, don't say anything bad, like they're retaliatory. But there is like this feeling of just being heavily surveilled at all times. But we also know from this interaction, like the Valtae takeover does have some implications. Well, the technology still seems to be severely lacking. There's definitely this feeling of being watched much closer. It's also very clear that Carl is just not an ordinary top crawler. He has this like different sort of visibility both inside and outside the dungeon, and you just get this real feeling that he is there to disrupt everything. And obviously, like that's the whole point. But it feels as though the panelists wanted to give him this information, but they also had to feign stupidity in a way. But there was this very real feeling that they were complicit and or against like the Valtae themselves, at least some of them. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe not the girl who wants to sell her book, but there's just this feeling there that they were saying things that they wanted Carl to know. Like the comment about the Valtae not running the crawl, as at least like technologically, was information I feel like that was given to Carl to exploit. Sure, the Valtae might be involved, but it's the same cheaply run dungeon that we all have come to know very well. And Carl has been turning this dungeon inside out. He's been exploiting its weaknesses. So I think it's important that Carl was able to not only hear that, but it's going to be important moving forward for him to exploit that. He knows that the Valtae aren't using their technology in this dungeon. They're merely kind of, for lack of better words, I mean, playing the heavy, right? Offering a little bit of support to the Borant Corporation. And before we dive into like the Lucia Mar / like Hunter altercation after that first visit to the con, let's talk about when Carl was whisked back to the con. Because like I said, I wanted to kind of talk about the con as one like linear section in this episode. So Carl is whisked back to the con later on in the story. And it's to do a signing, and the other Popoff brothers are there. And before we dive into like what happens at this signing, two things. One, I really like the Popoff brothers. Like I really enjoy them as characters. But two, I think I want to take a minute to kind of emphasize like kind of how sad their story is in this dungeon. And I mean, everybody's story is sad. I mean, this is a very grim, dark, horror-filled book. But they were essentially duped into becoming conjoined twins. I mean, they thought they would almost just get an extra life by choosing this race. I can't remember which brother chose it, but they did not understand that they would become conjoined, literally be physically one body. And so I just want to take a second to like witness, I don't know if that's the right word, but we're going to use it, to just bear witness to like what they've had to endure so far in the dungeon. Because even though I'm not quite convinced, and I'll talk about this later, that Carl's primal race has zero implications, sometimes I believe that these game guides just really, truly do not have the crawler's interests at heart at all. And while I do think Mordecai is a great guy and he's a wonderful manager, I just don't fully believe that every game guide in this dungeon, as we've seen, are either like checked out or they don't have good intentions. And I felt like their story was a little bit sad. But at the signing, a few important things really happened. So one, I think it's really important to note that like Donut's reach, I think, is a little bit further than I realized. We see when he's at the signing, like this person comes up with, I think it was like the Society for the Eradication of Cocker Spaniels, but like Cocker Spaniel is a censored word. And here's my thing, like, I knew Donut had like a fan club, but there's also this moment where you realize, wow, her reach is like so far across the galaxy. Like, how is she going to use that moving forward? Because I feel like Donut is nothing if not resourceful at this point. And we've realized it, and we've already seen her in League with Zev to work with like different emancipation fronts. So there is no way she's not going to use this reach in some way, but I can't quite see how. Apparently it's to eradicate Cocker Spaniels at this point, but I'm hopeful that maybe she'll use it for something a little bit more impactful moving forward. At the signing, there was also a live reveal of Carl's new sponsor, which we already talked about, which is the Plenty, that we know is also working with the apothecary, so it seems a little suspect. And my favorite part of the whole interaction was probably when they bring the reporters in after the signing, and there was a Naga reporter there who was the reporter that Odette had initially warned him about, that was going to be really mad that they scooped the B story out from underneath him. And he is just livid. But essentially, Carl stabs him in the neck with like a magical Sharpie. And here's my thing that I'm a little concerned about with this. Like, I think there's going to be actually some major consequences from this. So aside from just like the legal ramifications that they talk about in these chapters, I think this is going to play out not favorably for him in lower floors. I mean, not only does he have the Mantids, the Skull Empire, I mean, there's also now the Naga, who I think are going to be gunning for him as well. We also know that this reporter has ties through other family members to the Blood Sultanate, who Donut and Carl have to eliminate on the 9th floor. Might put a wrench in that plan. He also thinks this scene was almost a little bit humorous, but also maybe a little bit of foreshadowing as well, that Carl and Donut, and I quote, are some sort of Antichrist figure sent from the heavens to bring about the apocalypse. And apparently this is like a growing conspiracy theory, but it's 100% foreshadowing. And I think it's going to, at least on a small scale, be exactly what's going to happen. And Carl and Donut are just going to be the force to be reckoned with. And yeah, like destroy the world that they know and love, as far as the dungeon goes, at least. One thing I really appreciate about Matt's writing style is the way that it just consistently gives me whiplash from scene to scene. And so we have this scene, or at least his first visit to the con, where it's kind of like, it's chaotic, don't get me wrong, but then we're ripped away and we're plunged directly into Lucia's town, where there's the Nebulars, Vra, Lucia, like all coming for Carl, and they are angry. But what I really appreciated was Carl used the audience from the panel, used all of their input to kind of manipulate the situation. So there's always this sense of being surveilled, and he knows whatever he says and does is going to be kind of transmitted outwards, even at a panel. So he used their information and he kind of concocted his own plan while seemingly also just derailing them, like letting them believe that they were concocting a different plan and that he was going to follow that narrative. So we really see, like, Carl, I feel like he always has this perception of himself that he's not like this smart guy, he's just a casual, normal, whatever kind of person. And then he does these things where he is consciously leading the audience, the viewers, down a certain path while plotting in the background. And to me, that's someone who's actually very intelligent, very scheming, and very mindful of what's happening around them. And what I also appreciated is that he leaned on Donut in this situation. He was really set up to not make it out of the situation alive. I mean, I think people were hoping that he did, the viewers especially. And I think what I liked about this whole scene was that it just shows how much Donut not only is maturing, but that she doesn't need Carl to carry her through the dungeon. I think this entire situation, and I'll talk a little about the exact like scene with her and Lucia in Lucia's togs. First, I want to just give you my highlights of what happened when Carl just entered Lucia's town and it was just chaos. So first he like plops in, you know, casts his like tripper capability, and it just, everything goes crazy. And then he threw an alarm trap that played Ballroom Blitz. And so I think my favorite part about this scene was the whole time I was reading it, I was just thinking of like Ballroom Blitz just blaring in the background, which made it entirely more epic. But Donut casts clockwork sludgies to so Lucia has this habit of putting like these transport traps wherever she goes in a town. And Donut knew that. And she was, just like screaming at Carl through the chat, like, don't like come into the safe room. But so she casts clockwork sludgies to trip those and they get transported. And then through like all the chaos, like Ron's up with the double gonorrhea from the arrow, and Carl and this dang ring. I mean, this thing is not going anywhere. He kept like marking the nubs before just like eliminating them. And then they also use Lucia's teleport traps against her and transport Lucia to Vra. And I think they were kind of hoping that Vra would have taken Lucia out. I think that was the hope. But, she's scrappy and she got away. And there's just, gosh, I'm going to talk about Lucia more in a minute because there is so much to this girl. And I just feel like with everything, we're just not getting the full picture. But I think the most important thing that happens, aside from giving Vra double gonorrhea, was Carl falling through the ceiling of Dewada's temple and desecrating the shrine, even though Lucia was the one who like literally eliminated everybody in this town in the temple. It didn't matter. He was the one that actually desecrated the temple and destroyed the shrine. So now he has Dewada as an enemy, which is important. We need to hold on to that for later because there's something really important with that. I'm going to cover Lucia and the temple separately, but before I do, there was this really sweet moment in the safe room, and this was after all the chaos, after Carl just kind of like sat for a moment, and his adrenaline's pumping, there's so much going on, but he looks around and he thought this. He said, "This is it. This is my family now." My heart continued to pound from the fight. I knew I was about to crash, that the shakes would hit me, that the river in my mind would roar. But for now, at this moment, I took comfort in the friendly faces all around me. It was Katya, Ellie, Imani, Bautista, Louis, Firis, Gwen, Tran, Brittany, along with several others I didn't know as well. Mongo was also loose and moved freely about the spaces and demanding scratches from everyone like he was an attention-starved dog at a party. And this element of found family, I just think it's my favorite thing about this dungeon is that despite all the chaos, all the horror, they're able just to create this space for comfort and connection and safety. And I just think there is some beauty in that. Even though it feels hopeless 90% of the time, there's still these really beautiful moments where they are connected. Every time they enter their safe room, their space, their guild hall, I just didn't realize how desperately I needed the breath too. All right, I promised I'd talk about Lucia, so let's get into her. I mean, what is the deal with Lucia? What is going on with her? During the fight with Donut, I mean, before Carl was able to make it there, so Carl's at CrawlCon, and he abruptly gets transported out of Lucia's town. So Donut is out in the open, and Lucia is just going for her. And we get to see how capable Donut is in this situation and how she's able to use all her abilities very adeptly and also knows her limitations as well. We also know that children are not allowed in the dungeon, but yet here she is. And we also know via Donut that the show editors cut out something very important that she said when she was talking to Donut. So the showrunners cast the entire showdown between her and Donut, but they left out something really important. And when she was talking to Donut, she said someone in her mind, his name was Alejandro, I should say, and he is her youth assistant. And I know Mordecai also says, that's interesting. Youth assistants do take care of kids that enter the dungeon, but they're not allowed to actually participate in the dungeon. I don't know what's going on. And we see that she wanted to crawl a draw with Donut, and she has a bartender for some milk. And then she's smacking her head, and you're what is going on here? And yes, there is always that possibility that she could just be mentally ill. But I have a theory that it's actually more of a Valte parasite in her brain. Kind of assisting her, but also not in the way that Maggie took over Chris, right? I think that I don't know, this could be fully off base, but I think that Valte are able to kind of adjust how much they take over a crawler's mind. And I think Lucia, I'm wondering if her split personality with her different forms also takes over as well. But I do feel there's something else occupying space in her brain. She also alludes to having friends on the last floor, but then also says that one of her dogs is the bad one. And that's the one that kind of annihilated all the crawlers on the other floor that she was friends with. And so when Donut does end up, killing one of her dogs that pokes the head through the hole that she casted with her hole spell, and then she cuts off the hole, and then the dog was decapitated. And Lucia is just devastated, saying, "You killed the wrong one," like, insinuating that dog was the good one. We also know that her dogs have two different personalities, one good, one bad. And so you're starting to wonder, like, okay, I don't think it's mental illness. I think there's something really going on here. But also, yeah, I don't know. She could just be a little bit crazy. That's also possible. But I do think my hopes of Lucia teaming up with Carl and Donut is squashed, at least very much for the time being. You don't kill someone's dog and then repair quickly after that. Like, it just doesn't happen. And I also said I would talk about the temple. So yes, there are some major consequences following the desecration of Dewada's temple. And so this god just sounds like a weird, like, nature squirrel god with antlers that can adjust its size, which seems like pretty whatever at the time when Carl initially gets the reward for desecrating the temple. And you're like, okay, it doesn't seem too bad. Other than Carl not being able to go near like the Dryad settlements, which is inconvenient and does kind of pose an issue when he's trying to meet up with Miriam. But we also know that Cersei Took has sponsored Dewada, and she's coming to the dungeon like Maestro did with Grull. Cersei is going to be coming as Dewada. So we know this information from Carl's pacifist sponsor, who kind of tried to subtly give him this information. And we know his pacifist sponsor is actually a former crawler. And Loki seems like one of the best sponsors that he has, and truly believes in Carl's ability to kind of take it all down. And I do think that's what the pacifist organization's goals are, is to get Carl to align with their interests, which is to take it all down. Moving forward a little bit, I had some major questions about Big Tina and like, what's up with the dinosaurs last week? And I don't think I was ready for the dinosaur situation / quest to become such a big piece of the plot in this part. But I definitely got a little bit more than what I bargained for when I said I wanted to know what the deal is with Big Tina in my episode last week. Shout out to the Mama Ursine Prudence, who gave us the Footloop coded lore with Big Tina. You're a real one. Thank you for telling us all that. But also the TLDR is all the dinosaurs were really bears, and Big Tina is a little girl that just wants to dance, and Kiwi is her mama, the Velociraptor, who's also Mongo's girlfriend. Donut ends up charming Kiwi at some point, and then Donut ends up getting the tenuative allegiance of all her gaggle of Velociraptors, if you will. But Signet reminds them, and again with the foreshadowing, that it's never good to have a single point of failure. And yes, that is really dangerous. Something happened to either Kiwi or Donut, something happened to Donut, Carl is screwed. And then if something happened to Kiwi, all of Velociraptors, Big Tina, are going to turn on Carl and Donut. So it's just really not good that Carl only has the allegiance of Kiwi. But you know what? Also, it's a pretty cool image. Like watching Donut and Carl kind of roll up and having this gang of dinosaurs behind them to take it all down. You know what I mean? One of the other looming questions I had last week was in reference to Imogen, and if they would go down the stairs early or if they would try to confront her early on, because we know there's also this Vengeance of the Daughter quest in the background that is from part 2. Well, we know that the dungeon, obviously, we knew this before, but we know 1000% this dungeon wants them to go to the Masquerade, obviously. But I did not see, I knew they picked up Ferdinand. I knew it was going to be important, but I didn't see them using them as a boss at the Masquerade with Imogen. I just didn't see that happening. And God, my heart broke for Donut. And the fact that he fired a lightning bolt against Mongo, and then Donut saved Mongo by taking the hit and didn't even think twice. And I saw this quote floating around. I can't remember exactly where I saw it on social media, but someone said, Donut is the pet mom that she wished Beatrice was. And the fact that she took that lightning bolt for Mongo and activated her cockroach skill. And then, God, it was just heartbreaking the way Carl just was devastated and was so worried, and he was that was too close. And very much this entire scene felt like a soap opera, and you're sitting there thinking yeah, because it was intended to, the showrunners want this drama amped up. That's the whole reason they brought Ferdinand here to the dungeon. It was to disrupt Donut. And Donut, even though she's putting on a brave face, and she's matured immensely, I mean, I said, my heart just kind of breaks for her. It stinks. But also, Carl also insinuates that his dad, he's not even sure if he's alive at this point. And so you're kind of wondering, like, if he is, like, that's not good. These showrunners, these people running the dungeon, will stop at nothing to amp up the drama at any point that they can. We also keep getting reminded that the High Elves were the only ones not impacted by the 9-tier attack that impacted all the other NPCs. The same attack that turned Big Tina into an Allosaurus, not a T-Rex, that's an important distinction. But it's also very important that the AI is really, really, really trying to push them towards not only like this plot, this thing, but they really want them to go to this final masquerade. And even with the creeping vines, I mean, you just get the sense that the AI wants them at this masquerade and it's going to happen. And I don't think they're going to go down early. There's also like these promises that he made to Juicebox as well. And so when Ferdinand shows up, like Carl just has this gut reaction to protect Donut, and he's like, that's it. We're going down the stairs. We're finding a stairwell. I'm not making you do this. And Donut assures him that she's fine. But all the other crawlers are also ushering him not to go down the stairs early. They're like, oh, we know your character. Especially Katya's like, I know you. You're going to feel so guilty if you do this. Like, you agreed to help Juicebox. But is it just me, or does Carl feel like he doesn't really care about that much anymore? Like, I feel like he's starting to really, I don't know if it's the impacts of the ring or maybe his race, which I will talk about in a little bit, but I feel like Carl is, as long as it's like his group, his guild, his like found family is safe, like he's kind of just deciding like that's what I need to focus on, and his top priority is Donut. Before I move into like my favorite character of the week segment, I want to make a quick note. I formerly used to call this my favorite NPC of the week. But then someone kindly noted in the first episode of book 5 that I named Prepotente as my favorite NPC. And there's an issue with that because Prepotente is not an NPC, he's a crawler. Truthfully, I just really, I don't know what I was thinking. I wanted to lean in and really highlight Prepotente because I loved him so much. And I'll be honest, I just didn't think too deep into it. Like, obviously, he's not an NPC. He's not a non-playable character. But yes, you're right. He's not an NPC. And I think that this segment should really be titled My Favorite Character from this week, because I feel like, especially as we're gaining more insight into the crawlers and we're getting to know them much more, and even as like Carl's inner circle is kind of widening more, I want to give space to cover more characters, not just the NPCs. All this to say, I just really appreciate the feedback you all give me each week. Like, I want to just continue to make this series better and tailor it to really highlight these books as best as I can. So please, like, continue to comment all of these things, because it helps me not only get things right, but it helps me make it better for all of you as well. So my favorite character from this week, without further ado, is, I might get emotional in this segment, so bear with me, but it is Miriam. I am not ashamed to admit it. I cried during this scene. I can already feel myself getting a little bit emotional, and I did not expect that with these books. I really thought before going into Dungeon Crawler Carl, it was just going to be a very campy series, and it's not. Poor Miriam. She seems so good, but also so tired. And I felt like the dungeon pushed her down a narrative that she couldn't escape. And we see this with other crawlers as well, but forcing her to be like the source of the vampirism and like leading her to feel like there was no choice but to die. I mean, she's just that person that I at least got the vibe that she was always going to do what was good for the many, not just for herself. And there's one point where Carl goes, Miriam, I'm not going to kill you, but I will stand watch with you. I'll keep you safe and Prepotente safe until the sun rises. And then Miriam, oh my gosh, this is so sad. I'm sorry. I'm usually not this emotional of a person when I'm reading. It takes a lot for me to cry in a book, but when she goes, I don't know if it's probably because I have a son, honestly. But she says, my beautiful boy, Miriam whispered as she turned to dust, my beautiful boy. My gosh, I'm sorry. Here, this will make me not feel so emotional. And while Carl didn't kill her, he still marked her with the dang ring. Okay, so the scene was like so sad. So sad. But the fact that Carl used that ring. I don't know. It pulled me right out of it. There we go. Maybe I put that line in my notes for a reason. But the fact that Pony was just so devastated in the wake of Miriam's death, but he still had the good sense to eat his ring. Like, good job, Pony. It made me like you that much more. You might be coming quickly one of my favorite characters in this series. But also, the way that Donut vowed to protect him and give him a moment to grieve, that was like so just beautiful. And Donut, like her maturity and her just ability to just take care of people in a subtle way and a graceful way was just, I don't know. I don't even know if I have words for it. And while the Plenty might have wanted to get rid of Miriam, I'm pretty 100% sure that they did. They also 1000% just created an enemy out of Prepotente. I mean, if we thought Carl was going to burn it all down, Prepotente is going to go nuclear. I mean, they have no idea what they unleash, do they? And we also find that while Miriam did die, and she cured a lot of crawlers and NPCs along the way, her death did not dispel the vampirism entirely. We get the odious creepers spread throughout the map. And while they were tasked with a quest to kill all 50 of them, along with the hunters, it was not just the crawlers. They inevitably failed this quest because the hunters just, I mean, I don't know. Like I've said before, you just get the sense that they're really not equipped to be on this level. And then they end up failing the quest anyway, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, but things don't go as planned, that's for sure. Moving forward to my next segment is, normally I share a favorite Donut quote, but man, Samantha's becoming so funny. And so this week, it's not just a favorite Donut quote, it's a combined favorite Donut and Samantha quote. And right before Carl was coming back to Lucia's town, like, you know, Donut's trying to give him a rundown of what happened in the group chat. And this was right after CrawlCon, and Donut and Samantha are both typing in, mind you, all caps in the chat. And Donut's like, don't come back to the safe room. Samantha's angry, but she's kind of being taken away by these dogs and being just thrown around and chewed on, essentially. Also, I said I'd give you a friendly forewarning if the language I was ever about to use is not PG-13. And so I feel like I need to read this next little quote verbatim. So maybe skip ahead like 15 seconds if you don't want little ears to hear this. But Donut says, oh, honey, you used to be a sex doll. I'm quite certain you could handle all manner of indignity. And Samantha says, don't slut shame me. I'm going to kill your mother. And I don't know, I love this little exchange. And honestly, I need to listen to this on audio because I know Jeff Hayes voiced that expertly. But yes, yet again, I love that. I know I mentioned this a little bit ago, but I really love how every single one of their exchanges is just in all caps. It just adds this like little nuance to their conversations in the chat that just is perfection. It's so good. I want to move forward to the honorable mentions segment of my podcast. And this is kind of my favorite segment because I just get to dump everything that didn't fit neatly into this episode and randomly and chaotically just dump it here. And so the first thing is Carl's river within his mind, and it is raging. And I said I was going to talk about his primal race, and I think this is the perfect time to do so because, well, I initially hypothesized that I thought that this river within his mind was his rage. I still think that's true, but I'm starting to wonder if this raging river is also tied to his primal race. And we also get this moment where we kind of think about when he was selecting his primal race initially. And Mordecai wasn't really sure all that it entailed. He said, you still keep your form, but then that only, at least for me, allows me to conclude that there's something inside, like inwardly, that he's going to experience some sort of shift. And why wouldn't it be like his mental capability? Why wouldn't something mentally be shifting if he is going primal? Because we are reminded time and time again how AIs go primal. And so we can only assume that his primal race is going to have some sort of like unhinged insanity piece, like this inward rage that's trying to come out. Also, I mean, it could be his trauma also kind of undulating beneath the surface. Who knows, but I thought it was important to make note. Speaking of the AI going primal, we get some really important like information about that from when the hunters were transported around the map. So going back a little bit, I talked about how they failed the quest for the odious creepers and not killing all of them, and how they were also tasked to do that quest with the hunters as well. So the AI, because there was some lawsuit, I believe it was from Vra's mother. Yeah, it was from Cersei Took. So she was trying to, Vra has this raging double gonorrhea. Cersei's trying to get her off of this floor. She tries filing this thing for the hunters to be able to leave, some lawsuit. And the AI is essentially just sick of it at this point. And the AI was like, yeah, I don't care. You're not leaving this floor. And you guys have not done enough. And it instituted, I believe there was like a blood bar where they couldn't be in the safe room unless their blood bar was full. And so all the hunters that didn't do anything just got transported around the map. And unfortunately, like it's like 9 times out of 10, probably like the accountants that are just hanging out in the city of Zakau. But whatever. So this hunter, because it didn't really do anything in this dungeon, gets transported not so subtly to Carl. And the hunter even makes note of that. He's like, listen, the AI 100% sent me to you because I'm a yapper and it's going to tell you everything. First thing, we find out the AI cannot be changed once it's in progress in the dungeon. You can't just switch it out. But it usually doesn't go primal like this until the 10th floor. And with the hunters and the crawlers failing the initial quest of removing the odious creepers, we also now have, I think it's like pronounced Gehenna bramble, which is basically like these poisonous creeping thorns that are just pushing them towards the Butcher's Masquerade. And it's going to consume the entire map. And so even though Carl kind of likes this hunter and finds him somewhat hilarious, he still stomps him with his foot. And we're kind of starting to see Carl just trying to like appease the AI's foot fetish time and time again without even like talking about it anymore. Just assume he has this really great crushing capability with his foot, so he's going to use it. And then also Carl and Donut getting nipple rings from this hunter was just like so random, but definitely worth an honorable mention. There's also this moment where Carl was trying to get hold of the male mantis, because we know with double gonorrhea, you either have it until you castrate yourself or you pass it on to somebody else. And there's only one male mantid in this level. And so Vra's trying to get to him. Carl, is like, okay, we're going to get to him first. And so basically, long story short, this guy drops some lore. So there's like the larger borough government in the Mantids, and then there's also the Dark Hive. We also know that the Dark Hive that Vra is part of was the same group that sold the used AI to the Bort Corporation to run the dungeon. And so we know that his AI is degenerating quicker because it's used and it's just, the degeneration is moving faster than it normally would. It's going primal much, much faster. Which also explains why it was just had this like extreme preferential treatment towards Carl from the very beginning. And then we also see Samantha getting like stronger and faster. And the fact that they keep mentioning this, this is going to come into play. I'm hoping and like there's some epic final scene at the end of part 4 and Samantha just does something insane. Or that Signet is able to help her get a body back and then she becomes really, really powerful. That'd be really cool. And then Mordecai also just drops some lore about Odette getting charged with something when she was his manager and Mordecai testified against her. And so you're like, the lore is intensifying between those two. It was also mentioned just casually that Quan has long since dropped off the top hunter list. I'm going to be honest, I kind of forgot about him, forgot he existed, and he's just out there chilling without an arm. I would like to actually get an update on him. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. I don't know. He might just fade into the oblivion. Who knows? To close out this episode, I have quite a few looming questions moving forward into part 4. And one of my questions also happens to be one of Carl's just thoughts that just floated through his brain in these chapters. And it is, will the crawlers transform back into humans when they leave the dungeon? Or will they get to keep their new powers and abilities when they eventually leave the dungeon? Because it got me thinking, he entered that one space. Was it called like a 0-0 space, or where essentially he was stripped of all his capabilities when he went to the con. And you're starting to wonder, like, it pulls you out of the dungeon for a second. You're like, so all of these are like artificially given to them. And he's becoming more and more used to having all these things, but everything kind of just snapped back to normal if and when he does leave. Another question that I have relates to Katya, and it's when she dropped the random nugget that she wanted to talk to Carl about something, and it's literally never good when she does this. And so, what do you need to talk to Carl about? Let me know, Katya. I want to know. And then what is this recital for Big Tina? Like, what does a dinosaur's dance recital look like? it's going to be interesting. I don't know. We'll see. And then how is Carl going to use this information that the Pacifist Network gave him to defeat Cersei? I'm really interested to see how that plays out. And lastly, will they defeat Imogen, and what losses will they incur by attending the Masquerade? I mean, I'm concerned for Donut, especially with the whole Ferdinand thing. Will they go down the stairs early? I know Carl is still kind of leaning towards that, but I just feel like the dungeon's going to make it impossible for him to do so. I've learned to leave all possibilities open, especially with this series. I kind of want to see the loot they get from turning in the Hands of the Hunters too at the Masquerade. So part of me really just wants them to attend, but I also want them to be safe. But they're not really ever safe in the dungeon now, are they? Join me next week as I dive into part 4 and share my final thoughts on The Butcher's Masquerade by Matt Dinniman. Also, what did I miss that you want me to chat a little bit more about in next week's episode? Let me know down in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to get alerted when I release a new episode. Thank you so much for crawling with me today. Bye.